Evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You're joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and tonight we are talking Buffalo Bills wide receiver position preview, which is a much different discussion than in previous years when we were rolling out Andre Holmes and Kelvin Benjamin and Jeremy Curley as our starting receivers. So tonight I wanted to grab one of the foremost wide receiver experts that you guys see in the Twitter sphere. And despite him being a Patriots fan, we still respect what he says. Brad, what is going on, my man? This is Brad Kelly.
Nothing much. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's we have you, we have Mark Schofield, even Taylor, some other guys that, every once in a while there's a handful of people who support the Patriots who also know their way around a football field. So for anybody who doesn't know, Brad does some awesome work for Cover One, has worked for a lot of different forums and different places. We got to hang out at the Senior Bowl. He not only played wide receiver, coaches wide receiver at the college level, and has a great deal of skill and knowledge on how the position is played. So those are the kind of people we want to bring in to be able to talk about each of these position previews, and he's going to help us out tonight with the Bills depth chart as we get going. So make sure you're following him at Brad Kelly 17 on Twitter. Check out his work on Cover One, all kinds of good stuff. Before we get into the fun tonight, I actually have a bit of an announcement, and we are excited that for the 2020 season, we are bringing back a presenting sponsor, and that presenting sponsor is Uncle Jumbo's American Vodka. And I'm really proud to be able to partner with a company like this. When America was in need, they actually shut down the distilling portion of the company and started producing hand sanitizer for everyone. Really made some huge headway and still have plenty of that available. But now that America is getting into the dog days of this pandemic and trying to figure out how to survive, sometimes you need a little bit of other support. So whether you're looking at Uncle Jumbo, the bottling our country's spirit and everything that they have going into their traditional American vodka, they have some pretty tasty beverages as well. The blueberry lemonade, raspberry iced tea. They're coming out with an orange cream soda and root beer float. So just some fun things as you're getting into the tail end of summer here and into that tailgating mode. I know everybody's still trying to figure out how tailgating is going to work in today's football world, but something fun to be able to check out. You can actually find them now at UncleJumbosDistillery.com. Some different changes out there allowed them to open up a little bit more of an online presence as they're sending things out here. So we'll talk about them again in a bit, but just really excited to partner with all the Katritas brothers and everybody over there doing some fun and exciting things. And it really makes us proud to be able to partner with a company that's locally homegrown and doing it here in Clarence, New York, and bringing some good things out there for all the people to enjoy. So make sure you're checking out what they have going on at Uncle Jumbo's. Find them at UncleJumbosDistillery.com. You'll find that in the description for the show, and they'll be our presenting sponsor for the 2020 season. So really excited to partner with them again, and looking forward to a lot of fun. Getting back into football, tonight is the final phase of our position preview. We've gone through every single position group on the Bills roster, and I will say not many of them have had a bigger overall turnover than the wide receiver position over the last 2 years. And I opened up with, what may sound depressing, but just 2 years ago, the Bills' top wide receivers were people like Kelvin Benjamin, Andre Holmes, Jeremy Curley, Zay Jones. And now to roll out a top three of Stephon Diggs, John Brown, and Cole Beasley is just a significant shift. So, Brad, as we look at the overall group, just what are some of your thoughts on how the Bills have shifted into this level of talent changeover?
So I was actually thinking about this on my drive home today, and I was thinking about how in a lot of situations when it comes to the Patriots, they're not big on free agent signings. They like to find value in their own players, guys who they know who have been in the system, who they evaluate, who they developed, who they know fit, they know their personality. They're not huge on like pretty big free agent deals or really like making significant trades to get top talent. Now they have acquired Stephon Gilmore. Generally speaking, though, they shy away from it. And the fact that the Bills over the last two off seasons have added Stephon Diggs, John Brown, and Cole Beasley, and as you're pulling up, not bad cap hits, I think, for what their talent is. I think one is very impressive, and two, like you said, completely changed the dynamics of that wide receiver room, and turned it from a big weakness to what I think now is an obvious strength, assuming all three are able to stay healthy.
Well, and obviously, as we're showing here on our friends at SpotTrack.com, the Bills have spent the third most in the league at wide receiver. That is a huge shift from where they were previously. Part of that is a little bit of a pull forward in Stephon Diggs. His overall money didn't get shifted, but as part of the agreement in the trade, they took 3.3 million from his 2023 and 2024 salaries, pulled that forward to now, guaranteed a little bit more chunk in the next year. He still was owed roughly 4 years and 44 million over there, but gave him a little bit of boost here and a kind of a welcome to Buffalo, little pat on the back getting in there. But having those kind of combinations of salaries where your top three are at 30 million is a substantial investment. And I think that we've talked a lot and obviously did an entire show on Josh Allen and everything that's there. I think the biggest thing this does is isolate those variables that we've eliminated, that you now have guys who can run precise routes, visually flash open, allow him to get there. And now you can make a real evaluation of his skill set when you have guys at this level. So we'll get into a little bit of the fun with those guys here at the end of the show. But let's start with some of the guys here bringing up the rest of the roster. So the Bills, as many people know, we've had to find those kind of underdog, undrafted free agent, street free agent guys for a long time to root for. And over the years, we've had a couple that have gone different routes in the past year or so here. In 2018, it was Robert Foster coming out of Alabama and had that kind of flash of the end of the season with some long balls with Josh Allen. Duke Williams coming out of the CFL last year. Isaiah McKenzie kicking around as kind of a fun gadget guy on that jet sweep motion. And I don't know, in the structure that they have here, they've traditionally only kept 6 wide receivers. So we'll talk about the draft picks in a moment here. But any thoughts on if you think you see a future with those guys in Duke Williams, Robert Foster, and McKenzie? And do you think that any of them can push one of those recent draft picks for a roster spot?
I think if any of them are going to do it, it's Isaiah McKenzie. Mostly because in this past year with the Bills, this past season with the Bills, he was relatively productive. I think he had 25, 27 receptions. But on top of that, when you're looking at your number 4 wide receiver, a lot of it has to do with special teams. And he does bring a return value on. He has experience doing punts and kick returns. And that's that's going to be the separator when you're talking about your 4th to 6th wide receiver. So if you're talking about this player who's going to stay, he's on the roster. I think it's going to be him, mostly because 27 receptions, and then he also has the return ability on top of it. I don't personally like Robert Foster skill set wise. Is he a special teams guy? I don't know for sure.
He actually started to make a little hay as a gunner. They actually, we couldn't see much as a return standpoint. And that's actually been my biggest frustration with McKenzie is you obviously see the physical skill set. His movement skills apply perfectly. He has a little bit of the yips with the catching of the ball. And I hope that all he did all offseason was stare at Andre Roberts and watch him confidently catch every single punt on a running start. Andre Roberts is the most aggressive return player I've ever seen. He catches every single one with a running start. It's amazing. I wish McKenzie could do that because I'd love to blur them with the jet sweep motion and some of the little gadget plays and return skill set versus having to be 2 separate players.
For sure. And then to finish the thought with Foster, I think realistically, you saw a different player in his second year compared to his rookie year. I liked him coming out of Alabama for someone who was so not productive. 4 and 5-star recruit, was hurt a lot, but the difference in the level of play that he had at wide receiver from his rookie year, specifically the second half of it to last year, was vast. I don't have an explanation as to why, but it was a pretty big difference. I saw him live play at New England. I think it was week 16, his rookie year, and he looked great. And then every time I saw him on the field this past year, it was rough.
I had people arguing with me that he was going to be the number 1 receiver over John Brown. And don't get me wrong, I was lobbying that it was going to be John Brown, but it wasn't something where I was laughing at them or that I was mocking them, because over the second half of last season, if you extrapolate, or the previous season, if you extrapolated that over a whole year, it was unbelievable production. It would have looked like a number 1 wide receiver. So coming back with 3 catches blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
On 18 targets, am I reading that correctly?
Oh yeah. It was something.
So definitely had struggles. If he can recapture that it wasn't really, I don't want to call it a flash in the pan because it was over like a 6 to 8 week stretch his rookie year where he really was productive. And like you mentioned, the deep balls were extremely impressive. His ability to track the ball down the field was awesome. But if it doesn't recapture, I think it's a guy who's looking at getting cut, especially because McKenzie is going to give you a little bit more in the return game.
Yeah, that second half stretch that Foster had was special, and I can't lie, I kind of thought there was going to be a little bit more to it. I thought he was going to be that second outside threat with Beasley in the slot, and it just never materialized. So it's going to be interesting. And now as we get into the 2020 class, that I think everybody talked about this historic draft class, and I actually think the Bills' two receivers are a perfect example of that. It didn't have maybe even some of the top end talent you're going to see coming out this year with your Jamar Chase and people like that, but it was the depth of the class that was unbelievable, that you could go 20, 25, 30 receivers deep that were really solid NFL caliber guys. Maybe give some thoughts on where you saw Gabe Davis and Isaiah Hodgins coming in, and getting them in the fourth and sixth round. I thought was pretty nice. This year it seemed right, but in historic years, I think they might have gone a little bit earlier than that in a normal wide receiver class. So, what were your thoughts as you studied them coming into this year's draft?
So I actually had a higher grade on Isaiah Hodgins than Gabriel Davis. Similar sized guys. I thought Davis was a pretty linear athlete. He's just a straight down the field type of player. And that is going to be difficult when you run a 4.55, I think is what he ran. Just generally speaking, you can take out the 6'4", 200, 210, 220 pounds. If you run a 4.55, you're not a very lateral athlete, it's difficult to have consistent success in the NFL because you're going to be pressed a lot and you have to beat it, and you're really only going vertically. And if you look at the 20-yard shuttle that you just pulled up, very bad, and it really
the 1%,
very bad, yeah. And it kind of highlights the fact that he is a very straight line athlete, whereas Isaiah Hodgins wasn't as fast in the 40, but has that agility. Has the left and right, the lateral ability, better out of breaks, in my opinion, and a lot more fluid when it comes to his body control, where he's not a yards after the catch player, but he is a very good possession receiver. And I think on a down to down basis, that's the guy who's going to produce more when you compare the two, especially at 6'4", with his ball skills, with his ability to go up and get it. Now,
I think depending on the stat service that you use, some people had him as the number one catch rate of any receiver coming out.
Yeah, I think he only had 1 or 2 drops. Yep. Yeah. Caught pretty much any target that was close to him. Needs to add strength. Never going to be a dynamic, explosive guy after the catch. But if you're looking for a possession receiver, if you want your number 4 receiver to be a possession guy, he's going to be your man. If you love your top 3, you're looking for a specific role, he's going to be your guy. And now I understand the appeal of Davis as a down the field threat, big body who had success vertically. I just don't necessarily see it because I don't see his agility, his ability to be elusive as well. I think his is a little bit more of a project, where Hodgins is a little more polished right now.
No, it's interesting, and it's funny you say that. I actually did as well. I had them both in a similar tier, and certainly didn't do the degree of a breakdown that you did, but I was the same way. I had Hodgins ranked higher. I had them in the same kind of a 4th tier of where I had them, but I did have Hodgins at a chunk ahead of him. So it was interesting to see when Davis went earlier, and Hodgins was actually a name I was looking at in that 4th round spot. So then when it got back to that position to come back, I was like, oh, well, we got 2 of them, and here's another one there. Yeah. So now it's going to be interesting. That I'm curious with just all the different rules. I've seen a lot of people speculate that they don't think there'll be as much between team roster movement as we've seen historically. Now
because of no preseason.
No preseason. You can't see them in games. You have to have an open roster spot. You can't bring people in for workouts without a roster spot. If you bring somebody in, they have to go through 5 days of testing before you can get them in the facility. All those things come together. I think there's going to be some chicanery with who they can hide on practice squads. And I'm curious, is that a spot where one of those drafted guys allows you to maybe try to sneak them onto that practice squad with one of the protected positions? And I'm curious how that's going to work out where we get into that. And that brings us into the meat of the discussion for tonight, and that's obviously with this top three and the position that they've been in. It's kind of tough to wonder. Last year, John Brown had 115 targets, Cole Beasley had 106. I think there's some logic that the Bills are going to pass a little bit more this year, have a little bit similar to the second half of last season. Once they switched over to primary 11 personnel, Dable started to open it up a little bit more. If you took that over the entire pace of the season, it was about 50 or 60 more targets that would have just been out there through the first half of the year. So even assuming that 50 or 60 is not enough for Zay Jones. So how do you think we're going to see that distribution of targets? I think that if you're going to pull away from a guy who was a number one receiver last year, somebody with the approach and mindset of a John Brown is probably easier to explain that to than many other receivers who maybe led their team the previous year. But what are your thoughts on how that's going to mesh out with those top three?
So I think that I'm just going to start at the bottom is where I'm going to start this conversation. Where I say the bottom of the top three. Cole Beasley has performed as a number 3 option before and done really well and been really, really efficient with his targets when he was with the Dallas Cowboys. And realistically speaking, he probably fits best as your third option as a slot guy, who can move the chains, be a possession guy. Third and Beasley, you get him the ball, yeah, and you keep the drive going. Not necessarily like a dynamic type of player, especially now at his age. When it comes to John Brown, I've always thought that he also fits probably best as a number 2, because early on in his career, especially with the Cardinals, he was like a straight vertical guy, big plays, explosiveness, but you want to give him the ball down the field. And that kind of inconsistencies that you see with downfield targets, guys like Will Fuller or like Kenny Stills, those type of guys who are like, it's never the consistency you want from number 1. Now, I think he kind of put it together last year with the Bills, but when you put him opposite of Stephon Diggs, and Stephon Diggs is the superior talent, he's going to be the alpha in the room. That's going to be your top option. You need to get him the ball. You need to throw him the ball. I think you need to get him the ball like 7-8 times a game on average. He demands targets. He's going to demand the coverage. That's going to open up a lot of options for Brown and Beasley. But you have to get Stephon Diggs the ball because his separation is special. His ability to win wise contested is special. He's one of the best 10 or 12 players, 10 or 12 wide receivers in the league. You need to get him 7 or 8 targets a game, in my opinion. And then realistically, John Brown and Beasley are going to be our strong number 2 and 3 options. And then maybe one of the rookies is your 4th, but it's going to be a big, big, big drop from number 3 to number 4.
Well, I love the way you talked about that, and it leads right into where my next question was going was, how do you see this playing out from a domino effect of like you described it?
Mm-hmm.
What does that allow? Last year when John Brown's having to go against the Stephon Gilmores of the world and people like that, obviously that's much different than when you get to bump him down to number 2 corners when you have Cole Beasley out there, where before, if it was just Stephon or if it was just John Brown and maybe the other side was whoever we had out there in the moment early in the season, Zay Jones, and later in the year, they tried out Duke Williams, they tried out Robert Foster, they tried out Isaiah McKenzie, and you're trying these different guys out there. Now, when you have John Brown and Stephon Diggs, it's a little tougher for that safety to give an extra eyeball to the nickel corner, and you have Cole Beasley more in isolated single coverage. So what are some of the benefits that you could see in that domino effect where you insert a guy up at the top rather than somebody, if say they had kept the pick and it was Justin Jefferson, who I think is a very nice player and going to have a really good career, but certainly not the impact in that domino effect in 2020 where he would have been coming in as the number 3.
So the big thing regarding that is that the fact that Stephon Diggs is a vertical threat as a wide receiver. If you have a big body who's really like an intermediate possession guy, they're not going to stress the safety or demand safety help like a guy like Stephon Diggs does. And the fact that he is one of the most polished route runners in the league on top of being a vertical threat is going to pull a safety. And if it's cover 1, he's pulling that safety, or if they're too high, 1, to open up the running game, but 2, that safety is going to be to his side and he's going to be giving Diggs the attention. I think realistically, obviously the person who's going to help the most is Josh Allen. But when you look at Josh Allen's efficiency, sub 60% completion percentage, sub 7 yards per attempt. These targets that he's throwing now are going to improve in quality because of what you mentioned. Now Stephon Diggs has the number 1 corner. So John, as a domino effect, John Brown's getting the number 2. If you want to stop the run, if you want to go one high, you're getting a linebacker or a nickel on Cole Beasley. I think all those are good options, 1, 2 to 3. And then on top of that, you have a guy who's talented like Dawson Knox at tight end, who's covering him. You're putting a strong safety on him. Not a great matchup. Linebackers can't match up with him. I think the quality of targets that Josh Allen should throw, presuming he reads the defense correctly on a play-to-play basis, is going to improve. And you're going to see that yards per attempt jump up over 7. You're going to see his completion percentage jump up over 60%.
No, and I think there's obviously, when I made the comment earlier, looking at that, isolating the variables, that's the other benefit here, is that when you go into seasons and you're doing stuff like what the Jets are trying to figure out with Sam Darnold, and now you're changing everything around and you're wondering, hey, how early is Denzel Mims going to be available? Or, hey, what is Brashad Perriman going to translate over from that Tampa production he saw after several busty type seasons? Now you're wondering, if they don't produce, well, was it the talent that came in or was it Darnold? So one of my favorite things about this season and everything that Brandon Beane has added around Josh Allen is that I feel definitively by week 16, we are going to know what we have as a Bills fan base. There are going to be no excuses. You brought back your top 5, your top 9 linemen, plus adding Darrell Williams, Evan Boehm, and now also Brian Winters.
Yeah.
You brought back, all your weapons, plus added Stephon Diggs. You replaced Frank Gore with Zach Moss. There were no downgrades. Everything either maintained or got better. So now, whatever the production is, whatever the offensive output is, it's Josh Allen. That is the only variable that's there. Either his production allowed that talent to flourish, and hey, you feel great about the 5th-year option, you feel great about going into the extension. And if not, there's no waffling, there's no wishy-washy answers. It's very definitive that, hey, if the job isn't getting done offensively, we know why.
That's a extremely good point, and it's going to be super interesting for Bills fans who have been really high on Josh Allen to maybe turn on him, but at the same time, the people who have been negative towards him, like me, are going to have to do the same thing if he produces like he should.
And there are no excuses. Like, he should produce. Yeah. This is a darn good roster.
I agree, and I don't like it.
And believe me, as we've gone on, and as someone who's been a lifelong Pats fan, it's certainly much different than the previous 20 years, where on paper, like, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll bet against Bill Belichick, the day after he dies. That's fine. Like, I'm never going to get caught by that man again. But on paper, it's undeniable that this is the best roster in the division, and it's okay. I keep encouraging Bills fans. It's not only okay, this is the fun part of being a fan. You should have expectations. You should expect them to be able to perform well, because they've put together a roster that should perform. And, besides, I think the only thing that would make sense as a Bills fan is that they have the best roster they've had in 25 years and the season gets canceled because of COVID. That would be very Billsy for that to happen. But it's interesting. It's just a different dynamic than what we've had for 20 years. So having that kind of leadership in place is exciting to see.
So let me ask you this. If you could 100% know Cam Newton is healthy, performing at Cam Newton level, you would take the Bills roster still over the Patriots? If you know that Cam's healthy, that's a huge question mark, obviously.
So I would say in that case, I obviously feel less excited than I did when it was Jarrett Stidham going in. That obviously makes it much closer, and it's probably more like 60-40 in that spot. But I will say, I think the combination, it was already kind of tough before the opt-outs that, Danny Shelton, Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, all the different pieces, now adding Dante Hightower, now adding, you already had Deron Harmon. Now adding Chung. They're still going to be a solid starting 11. All the defections plus the opt-outs have now put it that 2 injuries and that defense is razor thin. So I do think that front 7, the secondary is still really strong. You still have both brothers. You still have Gilmore, added in
JC
Duggar.
Jackson.
The secondary is still fantastic. if that front seven has the wrong injury or two, or one or two of the rookies aren't ready to step forward in the way they obviously need them to, I think that's going to be the toughest one. I think the offense is going to be fine. I actually think fans should prepare themselves for some creative offensive looks. I think they're going to mix in all three running backs. I think the interior of that offensive line is still really good. I'm
It's
curious,
fantastic.
replacing Marcus Cannon without Dante Scarnecchia, I'm curious how that goes. Before losing Marcus Cannon to an opt-out, Dante Scarnecchia would have manufactured a human out of bubblegum and duct tape and made him a right tackle. Not having that, I'm curious, do they still have that same magic to come up with somebody to play right tackle? So there's some pieces there, but I think Cam with the 4 or 5 different NFL caliber running backs, I think there's going to be a creative offense out of that. And then,
Yeah.
if Edelman's still going to play, even if you don't get anything more from N'Keal Harry or from guys like that, I think that it's going to be certainly better than what it was. So we just have to see, can that early season 2018 Cam still be there, or have the injuries taken their toll?
I think that's a good point. I think realistically, the opt-outs of the Patriots are, when you take away Patrick Chung and Dante Hightower and Marcus Cannon, it's a crushing blow. I think I would have taken the Patriots roster with knowing if it's a healthy Cam. That's obviously a huge if too.
Sure.
But with those opt-outs is difficult. But anyway, figured I'd go. Let's talk Pats a little bit on your Bills podcast.
I still like it because I want it to be earned. Like I don't want it.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. Not that it would have celebrated any less if it was Jarrett Stidham, but now you're telling me you have Josh McDaniels, Bill Belichick, and Cam Newton. That counts. Like that's a legit season.
No kidding.
You're coming in there with real talent, and if they win this division, it's because they won it, not because they defaulted into it. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be fun. I actually, I've talked about it. I think the Dolphins are a year away from being something. They added a whole lot of talent. I thought they had such an unbelievable cachet of draft picks. I think they reached on quite a few of them. Like I like Dawson Jackson. I don't know if he was the 18th best player in the draft. Getting 2 at 5 is the whole answer. If he ends up being the real deal, that's all that matters. But some of the other picks, I don't know that I thought that they crushed it with the value of their picks, but they added so many names that all they need is like half of them to pan out, and it's a great draft still. And then the Jets, I'm a little bit nervous that at some point Joe Douglas is going to realize that Adam Gase is his coach and he's going to fire him and hire an actual coach, because Joe Douglas is really good. But as long as Adam Gase is there, I'm not all that nervous.
Me neither about them. I think the Dolphins defense is going to be great. Adding Byron Jones to Xavier Howard on the other side.
And Igbenogany in the nickel. Kyle Van Noy.
Emmanuel Ogbah.
Yeah, I don't love Shaq Lawson, but he's great in a rotational role. Like I think Van Noy and Lawson are good examples. I thought they overpaid a little bit, but they're good players. Like if you get a $7 million player for $10 million, does that really matter? Right now it's still a good player that you added who is worth signing.
Who's the coach? Is it going to be who's the coach of the Jets that's going to scare you? I guess is what I'm asking.
Ooh.
Brian Dable.
So that would be
scare
so
me.
hysterical.
That would scare me.
That would be so hysterical if Dable's head coaching opportunity, which he's obviously lobbying for and is working hard to get. Well, if he produces a great season, I made the case on a previous show. There is no scenario any Bills fan should want Brian Dable to be the 2021 offensive coordinator, because either he produced a good enough season that he gets a head coaching job, or if he didn't produce a good enough season that he produced for Josh Allen looked enough to get him a head coaching job, we probably don't want him back. So under either circumstance, we shouldn't want him to be the 2021 coordinator. So I do think that he's put himself in that position. And I think that they put so much talent around Josh Allen that he's going to look good enough to give him that opening. And, honestly, besides Bieniemy, and I have to assume that Josh McDaniels already has the handshake deal behind the scenes, that he's simply the handoff when the time comes, that I don't think he's actually on the market. So besides Bieniemy, like I don't know that Dable's not in the top 3 or 4 out there of available head coaches. He's going to get a nod if this season goes well.
I think he's going to. For the record.
Besides that, I guess I'd probably be a little concerned if they threw a ton of money in New York City glitz at a Lincoln Riley or something like that. It'd be one of those guys that I'd be worried they could catch lightning in a bottle with one of the, innovative offensive coaches who could tap into what I think is actually a decent prospect still in Sam Darnold. He's gotten a raw deal in what he's been given so
Yeah.
far, but I actually still like Darnold. I think he's got a bright future, but that's what I'd hate to see, is a bright offensive mind tap into his potential versus what Gase has refused to utilize.
And they're going to have picks.
Oh yeah, no, heck, after these couple of trades and what they got for Jamal Adams and all the different pieces, they're going to have options. And Douglas already did a nice job. He did more the quantity over quality in free agency, but had a nice draft too. Had a bunch of the mid-round guys I was targeting. He grabbed all of them. All right, Brad, this was a lot of fun, man. It's fun to be able to talk to a Pats fan and not just feel grossly inadequate. It's really exciting to feel like, hey, my team might be better than your team. How do you like that?
It's different. Like every time I see Tom Brady in a Bucs jersey, first of all, like a little part of me dies. But like I'm like obviously really excited for Cam Newton and like stuff like that. I think they're still going to be a double-digit win team, assuming the season happens. But it is weird, just like the range of outcomes, I guess, is broader as a Patriots fan than it has been in 20 years. And like if they go 7-9, like I could see it.
Sure.
And I haven't said that since Tom Brady became the quarterback in week 2 of 2001. Yeah. So it's like a weird like feeling, but also they could go 12-4, and I'd be like, yeah, I could see this team go 12-4. The range I think is broader, and it's a weird situation to be in as a Patriots fan, just to not have that yearly optimism at this point in time, thinking like, oh, we're going to win the AFC East and be the 2 seed. And,
the run of double-digit win division championships, and heck, just that stretch of like how many times the Patriots played in the AFC Championship game is disgusting. Like it's just unbelievable. And the fact that now it's a much more open race, I think it leads to a more exciting game. I think it's going to be an exciting season. I like it that they didn't just fall by the wayside. I think a lot of people believe in that. If you want to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. And, the Patriots are as definitive of a division champ as has ever existed. So if the Bills are going to try to stake their claim to being that next perennial power within the division, they need to earn it. And that involves taking down Bill Belichick while he's still there. So
the last time an AFC East team finished the regular season with more wins than the Patriots was the 2000-2001 season.
Yeah,
because the Jets and Dolphins tied them.
Yeah, even the year they actually technically didn't win it in the Matt Castle year. They at least it was tiebreakers.
2000-2001. I was 8 years old.
I had just graduated high school and was still unhappy about that. Was Music City Miracle territory.
I gotta throw that in there every once in a while. Just gotta.
Don't get me wrong. When I have you back on in the postseason, I'll be rubbing in all kinds of stuff.
At that point. Go ahead.
All right, man. Had a lot of fun tonight. Appreciate you guys in the chat again. Check out Brad's work over at Cover One. You can find him all over the place. Follow him at Brad Kelly 17 on Twitter. Really good follow and knows a lot about the wide receiver position, and you can tolerate the Pat stuff. It's fine. For our presenting sponsor, just really excited to be partnering with Uncle Jumbo's again. The guys over there are awesome. I'm actually excited moving back closer. It's somewhere that I'm able to go and check out the production system, and I'll be all masked up and everything, but going to go, get some of their products so I can come and actually show you to enjoy them post game afterwards. So really excited to check that out. We've got a couple other fun things going on. Eric's got a new sponsor for his video stream with Avant Realty. Make sure you're checking out what they have going on there. They're, another exciting local group. And if you listen to this show or you follow what we do at cover1.net over on the Cover One Twitter feed, and you enjoy what we're doing, you want to be able to reach Western New York people, you want to reach people in the football community, you want to reach people in our demographic, reach out to us and let us know. We have a lot of fun and exciting things going on, but I'm ecstatic to be partnering with Uncle Jumbo's again this year. They have a lot of awesome products. Make sure you're checking out what they have going on their new website, Uncle Jumbo's Distillery, and it's just something to be able to support a local company and someone in the local Buffalo community who's also providing a product that you can enjoy very, very thoroughly. So hopefully this will be a season that we are having more celebratory beverages and not drowning any sorrows. But Brad, thank you, man. This is a lot of fun tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.